All right, so we've talked about the basics of managing a group. I'd like to talk specifically about group counseling now. Believe it or not, group counseling sometimes produces better results than individual counseling. There are several advantages. The patients or clients, whoever is attending, gains emotional support from all of the other people in the group. They can help solve problems together. When you're in a one-on-one situation, it's just you helping to solve problems. But when people are in a group counseling situation, they're with people who are having similar problems, and often some of them have come up with strategies to deal with certain things, and they can help solve problems in some of the other attendees. Works very, very well. And often people are much more likely to listen to group members than they are to you as the facilitator, because they may think of you as the high and mighty, does everything right with regard to food and nutrition person. You know what I mean? And they may think that they can't possibly get to that level. There's the modeling effect. They can watch what each other's doing, watch what each other's saying, and model the good behaviors that are going on. Often it's very helpful because the other clients that are present will have attitudinal and belief examples that can kind of run throughout the group. So a good attitude, someone with a good attitude in your group can really go far toward moving the entire group toward, good habits. There are some disadvantages that you need to think about. And one of them is that there may be some individual responsiveness issues. And we've talked about this. Not everybody has the type of personality where they want to participate all the time. They may be holding back because they're timid. They may be bored. They may be angry that they have to be there. Okay, so sometimes the individual responsiveness just isn't there, and that this is where you, as the group facilitator, you need to try to pull them out. Group member personalities sometimes don't mesh. I've seen this happen many times, and so you need to sometimes deal with resolving conflicts between group member personalities. Sometimes, unfortunately, we end up having to remove people from the group if they're contributing to a poor group dynamic. A lot of times what we do, especially in the medical field, like if we have a group counseling session targeted toward diabetics, or we may have a group counseling session targeted toward patients with eating disorders. We may have a group counseling sessions targeted toward people who are overweight and obese, or who are having bariatric surgery. It works really well to have a set number of classes, like 6 classes. Then once, then if it gets over, you know what I mean? It's not like that there's no end in sight, and you keep having to deal with these personalities that just don't work very well in the group. You know that after 6 weeks, this is over and I'll have a new group. There is always the possibility of poor role models, unfortunately. And then sometimes it's very difficult to meet the needs of all group members. And sometimes people just don't want to talk about their personal issues in front of everybody. And so often what works really well is to do group education, group counseling together, and then take people who need individual counseling separately and do that at another time in another place. Now, when you're starting a group, it's very vital that you have everything down for the first session. That first session is very critical. If things go wrong during that first session, you'll often find that it continues. So make sure that everything is laid out properly, that that you've made all of your plans ahead of time. The composition of groups can be either open or closed. Open groups are groups like support groups. And these are groups that, for instance, may meet once a month on the first Monday night of each month, for example. And you can come or you don't have to come. It's open. They don't usually cost anything. So for example, at the nutrition clinic, we have a once-a-week support group meeting for patients with eating disorders. You can come or you don't have to come. Once a month at the Arnott Hospital, they hold a support group for people who have had bariatric surgery in the past. Sometimes people come all the time, and other times they might not come until, only but once every 3 or 4 months or so. Closed groups, on the other hand, they don't take any new members after the first or second session. And often, if they do, it throws the entire dynamic of the group off. So it's really not a good idea. 8 to 12 members works really well for small groups like this, for counseling especially. Some practical considerations for successful group management. You want to allow adequate time for organization. Usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks to plan these things out ahead of time. So if somebody comes and says to you, I'd like you to hold a class on, feeding children in 2 weeks, do you think that gives you enough time? Probably not. You probably should say, well, I'm not sure I can get it together quite that fast. How about if we plan on 6 to 8 weeks from now? Plan for adequate meeting time. The perfect amount of time seems to be between 60 and 90 minutes. In my experience, 60 minutes seems to be a little bit too short, because it takes a little bit of time. You've got housekeeping time in the beginning, where you're trying to address any issues that may have come up, and then so you really don't get down to business a lot of times until 10 minutes into the meeting. So 90 minutes, 75 to 90 minutes seems to work really well. Select a comfortable meeting room and location. Things that you might not have thought about. If you're dealing with, for instance, bariatric patients, could we have a class, hold any kind of a class or a group counseling session for bariatric patients in this room? No, why not? Because they won't fit. So you need to think about all that ahead of time. Believe me, I've thought about holding some group classes in the community. It's hard to find a place where you have armless chairs that will support somebody who weighs 400 pounds. One time I the Arnott Hospital has now changed things, so all of the chairs are armless and will support someone who weighs 400 pounds. But when I first started teaching classes there, one room had armless chairs and the other room had regular armed chairs. Well, one time they switched my room, not even thinking about that issue, and I had 25 people who got to sit on a chair with one cheek for the night. And it was so embarrassing for me. They couldn't fit in the chairs. Another time, I went and they had the room all set up wrong, like classroom style, like this. That doesn't work for that kind of a meeting. The best approach is to have them either at a round table, because rectangular tables tend to make it so that, like if I was sitting at a rectangular table across from Victoria, she's really the only one I'm going to be paying too much attention to. It's hard for me to turn my neck and pay attention to all of the other people. So round tables work best. U configurations in a classroom or a group counseling situation, where you stand at the head of the U and they're all sitting like this, facing each other and you. Now, if you're collecting fees for your class, you want to collect them ahead of time. Speaking from experience, you want to check your patient's insurance benefits ahead of time and make sure that it's all in order, because what happens is, if you take care of it afterward, sometimes the classes aren't covered, and then, you can't really say, I'm sorry, you have to leave. So then you may end up facilitating a group for 6 weeks for almost nothing, which is fine. Maybe you want to give some of your time to the community. I think that's good, to volunteer some of your time. However, if you're making this your business, you can't be doing that all the time. So you want to check benefits ahead of time. And then apprise your target group needs prior to selecting a meeting time. So for example, it might work really well to hold classes for mothers during the day when their children are at school, like if they're stay-at-home mothers. But if they're working moms, it might work better to hold it in the evening after their husbands have gotten home from work. So you need to check everybody's needs regarding time. Some other practical considerations. Consider the composition issues of the potential group. You want the people in the group to be as much alike as possible with regard to their problems especially. So you wouldn't put diabetics in with people who had eating disorders, for example. Not a good idea. If you have, say, one person who doesn't speak very good English, maybe speaks Spanish, it's good to have another person that they can identify with. So try to find people who will, provide some diversity for the group, but make it so that they have somebody else in the group that they can identify with, so they don't feel like they're, well, I'm the only one here that doesn't speak very good English, that sort of thing. Interview prospective members. Sometimes you have to do this over the phone. Keep the group leaders the same. Keep the group leaders the same. You do not change leaders in the middle of a program. It throws everybody off. And I think if you printed this PowerPoint before, I had this, I just realized it this morning. It said keep the group members the same. I meant to say group leaders. They need to stay the same. Be responsible yourself. If you say you're going to do it, do it. Be on time. Prepare. Don't waste people's time. Plan your sessions out carefully. This is why when we have classes like this one, we make a syllabus. We try to plan things out. Now, sometimes we don't always stick to it because, various things come up. But we do our best to try to plan things out ahead of time. We know what we're going to cover for each class. Consider refreshments. For certain groups, refreshments really add a lot to the dynamics of the group. If people aren't showing up, consider calling them and finding out, if there's some kind of a problem. And then always end with an evaluation. How did this go? Are there any areas where you think that improvement could be made? Steps that we go through when we develop a cohesive, well-functioning group. A lot of these kind of go along with the same steps that we follow in our counseling sessions with our patients. Step 1, establish an open, warm environment and productive leader-participant relationships. Step 2, balance facilitator information and group-generated information. You don't do all the talking. You let them do a lot of the talking. You are the facilitator. They're not there to just listen to you. Design problem-solving strategies. Sometimes things come up in groups and nobody ever really comes up with a good solution. And in that case, it's up to you to design problem-solving strategies. And then a lot of times it's very helpful to come up with little in-group projects to help cement information. For example, it might be helpful in a group of diabetics to pass out mock food records and mock blood glucose records, and then ask them to kind of look at these and brainstorm why blood glucose levels may have been high at certain times. Provide the opportunity for group members to practice new skills. So getting back to our group of diabetics, we just talked about a skill that they could develop, looking at their food records and trying to figure out where they went wrong. But also you may want to practice like self-monitoring of blood glucose, or how to give yourself an injection, how to use an insulin pump. Step 5, use positive role models and pacing to keep the group motivated. So you may actually want to bring in people from the outside who have been very successful, for instance. Let's go to our diabetic group. People who have very successfully learned how to use their insulin pump, and have them talk to the group as a whole. Or you may want to use people in the group who seem to be very positive role models and try to, give them more time to present in the group situation. And then there's our outcome again. You always ask for evaluation and feedback at the end, because we always want to continue improving, right? So even like with this group project, I've written down several things that I think need to change a little bit next year. So just based on feedback that I've gotten from you guys. So that's any group situation, that's what you need to do. All right, now every group has at least one difficult situation. So we're going to talk about these. There may be the person who makes an incorrect situation, an incorrect statement. Okay, that what they say is just blatantly wrong. You have to be very careful about how you handle this. But you can't let it go at the same time, because you don't want the other people in the group leaving thinking that that's correct. So something that you might want to say is, well, I can see your point of view, but let's try looking at it in a different way. Or actually, research shows that this is the case. I know a lot of people have thought, what you've thought in the past, but recent research has shown this, or that that's not the case. There's the prober. These are the people that are always trying to get you to self-disclose. They want to know how you do things. And Kelly, you were at the class the other day, right? I said at the bariatric class that I was at, I usually almost always have them ask me if I've had bariatric surgery. They want to know if I've had bariatric surgery. So I usually incorporate that right in the beginning. I'll let them know, no, I have not had bariatric surgery. But because if I don't, I invariably will have somebody ask me if I've had bariatric surgery in front of the whole group. So when that happens, instead, you want to try to avoid being self-disclosing as much as possible, because you're looking for them to help solve their own problems. So you may want to say something like, well, I don't want to make this about me. Let's get some other opinions on this. Or has anybody else dealt with this? There's the silent one. The person that doesn't talk at all. They might be bored. They might just be shy. They might feel like their input is not valuable. And of course, it is. We want everybody's input. Some people are quiet because they feel superior. I don't belong here. I know all this stuff already. When you have cases like that, you want to use eye contact. Actually make eye contact with the person and try to pull them in. Ask them for their opinion. Well, what do you think about this? And then it also helps to break into small groups when you see that kind of thing happening. There's a lot of times a griper. A lot of smiles on this, because we've all been in situations where there's a griper, right? This is useless. This is a waste of my time. They've usually got some kind of pet peeve. Some people are just professional gripers. I don't know where they get it from, but some people are. So a lot of times it's probably best to discuss issues with the person privately later on. You should avoid calling them out in the middle of the group session in front of everyone. We don't want to be the type of people who throw people under the bus. It helps to ask the rest of the group, well, how's everybody else feel? And a lot of times there's an expert in the group. They don't really need to be there because they know all this stuff already. At least that's what they think. A lot of times they want to take control, and they will try to take control from you. So something that you might say is, well, it sounds like you know a lot about this, but let's find out what everybody else thinks too. So who would like to share with us next? There's the inarticulate. We talked some about this. These are people who they have something important to say, but they can't quite figure out how to say it. And so it really works best in this case to paraphrase for them and ask them if you correctly understood what they're saying. There's the attacker. These people are, I hate having attackers in my group because they completely throw you off and they ruin the entire dynamic of the group. It bothers everybody when there's an attacker. I've had attackers attack each other. And I one time, fortunately it doesn't happen to me very much, but in a bariatric group one time I had somebody continuously attack me, everything I was saying throughout the entire session. So I'm up there in front of 25 people and this lady is questioning everything I say, attacking me, my anxiety level's going up and up and up and up, and you know what happens when your anxiety level goes up? You get cloudy thinking. Well, then you're just really in trouble. So it's really best. What happened in this case, I finally ended up totally ignoring her. If she started talking, I just kept talking. That was really the only thing that I could do with this particular person. I don't know exactly what was going on, but for some reason she was seeking to discredit me. And sometimes it works also to use humor in this situation. But sometimes you just have to kind of ignore that person and don't give them an opportunity to say anything anymore. I had a situation once too where somebody said something to somebody else. We were talking about alcohol. And you're not supposed to drink alcohol after bariatric surgery because it affects you very quickly. And one of the ladies in the group felt like one of the younger ladies in the group was saying that she was an alcoholic. And she just blew her lid. 20 people in the class, and she starts this cat fight with this person who's all the way across the room. And the other person didn't really mean anything by it. I think she was actually just kind of making a joke. But this lady didn't take it that way. So that was a tough situation too. So hopefully you won't run into situations like that, but you probably will. So I'm just warning you about them ahead of time. Yes, Abby? You can, if you have to. I wouldn't hesitate to do that. Yeah. When somebody does that, like this person attacked this other person just because they made some comment about alcohol, that usually is an indicator that they do have a problem they're trying to cover. But getting back to what you said, yeah, if you have to ask someone to leave in a group situation, then you have to. But I would use some of these other techniques first, if at all possible. There's the Dominator. These are the people that want to take control. They always want to be in charge of everything. They like to hear themselves talk, or they may be wanting to just avoid the topic. You'll notice that. When people want to avoid talking about something, they'll keep you talking about other things, even in your one-on-one situations with your clients. If they don't, if they're afraid that you're going to ask them about something, they will just gab, 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 gab. Hardly let you fit in a word edgewise. And they'll try to do it for a half hour straight until the appointment's over. Because they don't want to discuss the issue that's the real problem. A lot of times it helps in a group situation to have that person sit right next to you. And a lot of times you can tell right off the bat, when you walk into a room, who's going to be like that. So you want to watch that right from the beginning. It helps to say, well, that's an interesting story, but how about we finish it afterward? There's the Rambler. We all know ramblers. They start talking and they keep talking and they keep talking and they keep talking, and you just think, oh my goodness, am I ever going to be able to fit a word in edgewise? It just seems like they like to hear themselves talk. So the best thing to do with the ramblers is discontinue eye contact. You look away so that they don't think you're in, you don't want them to think you're interested anymore. Basically, that works quite well. But then you may also have to interrupt them, with a new question to kind of get them off of that subject. And there's always a class clown, it seems like. We don't have a class clown in here this semester, do we? Do we have a class clown? No. Oh my goodness. I have a son who was a class clown. I was the mom who got called every day during my son's 4th grade year. I could just count on it. Get home, phone rings, it's the teacher. She didn't deal with it properly. He spent probably most of the year in the hall. And I gave her ideas for, dealing with it, but she just wasn't used to it. She was new, I understand. But these are things that we need to get better at. If we need to learn how to deal with the class clown. So a lot of times what they're looking for is some attention. And so give them a compliment and move on immediately. It usually works better to give them a quick compliment and just, something like, you got a lot of energy to this group, but we do have to keep moving, so, on to the next question. And there's always little side conversations that you have to deal with. These can be very maddening because you feel like you're competing, basically. They might be side conversations where someone is actually discussing the information that's being discussed in the room as a whole. But they may also be side conversations where they're discussing what they're going to do after the meeting. So there's various reasons for side conversations, but it doesn't matter. Regardless, they throw you off your game and cause a problem. So you often will have to just put your foot down and say, well, it's time to get down to business. Or if it seems like the side conversations kind of started up after you were, discussing things for like 45 minutes or so, then you may need to say, do we need to take a break? It seems like a lot of you are starting to lose your attention. And by the way, 45 minutes is really about the top of our attention spans. Do you find yourselves falling out of the attention span thing around 45 minutes? Yeah, that's why these long classes, they're hard to keep you guys engaged. The Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes are actually very perfect when it comes to engaging people. 45 minutes